The night I found out, I was sitting in the driveway with the engine still running. I don't know how long I sat there. The garage door was open. The kitchen light was on. I could see my wife moving around through the window, making dinner like it was any other Tuesday. She had her hair up the way she always does when she cooks. She was probably humming something. She does that. I turned the engine off and just watched her for a minute, because I already knew. And I hadn't figured out yet what knowing was going to cost me. My name's not important. I'm 51 years old. I've been in commercial construction management for 23 years. I'm not a dramatic person. I don't have a lot of stories that start with, "You're not going to believe this." I go to work, I come home, I coach youth baseball in the spring. That's the kind of man I am. My wife's name is Petra. We met when she was 26 and I was 28 at a mutual friend's backyard cookout in Charlotte. She had a laugh that made strangers turn around to look. We got married 3 years later. We have 2 kids, my son Eli, who's 19 and away at college, and my daughter Mara, who's 17 and still at home. 20 years. That's not nothing. That's most of my adult life. Her name at the office was just a colleague. That's how she introduced the situation to herself, I think. That's how people do it. They build a little vocabulary that lets them not say the actual word. His name is Brent. He works Mantis. Worked to be consulting firm she joined 4 years ago. I knew who he was. I'd met him twice. Once at our company holiday party, where he shook my hand and said, "Great to finally meet you. She talks about you all the time." Once at a charity 5K she organized with her department, where he wore a shirt with their company logo and jogged next to her at the start line before I lost them both in the crowd. I did not know, at either of those times, what I know now. I found out the way a lot of men find out, not through some brilliant investigation, not through hiring a private detective. I found out because my wife got sloppy, and because the universe sometimes, not often but sometimes, gives you the exact piece of information you need at the exact moment you need it. She left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. She never does that. She's a private person, always has been. Separate passwords, separate email, always takes her phone to the bathroom. At the time, I told myself that was just her personality. She's introverted. She likes her space. I respected that. But she'd been running late that morning for a meeting, and she'd left in a hurry, and the laptop was just sitting there on the counter next to the coffee maker with the screen still on. I wasn't snooping. I want to be clear about that, not because it changes anything legally, but because it matters to me. I walked over to close it and I saw the name, just the name, in the preview line of an email thread. Brent. And then the subject line, "For when things settle down." I stood there for about 10 seconds. Then I opened it. I'm not going to describe everything I read. Some of it I still can't say out loud, but here's what I learned in the next 4 minutes, standing in my own kitchen in my work clothes with my coffee going cold on the counter. It had been going on for 14 months. She was 8 weeks pregnant. Not far enough along to show yet. I hadn't known she was pregnant. She hadn't told me, and they had a plan. Not a vague, emotional, maybe someday kind of plan. A specific plan. A timeline. A list of things she was going to do before she told me she wanted a divorce, including, and this is the part that made my vision go a little white at the edges, moving $40,000 from our joint savings account into a personal account she'd opened in February. I checked the account that afternoon. From my phone, in the parking lot of a job site in Mooresville, the money was gone. Not all at once. Over 6 months in increments small enough not to trigger anything. 500 here, 1,000 there. The kind of withdrawals that look like nothing if you're not looking. I had not been looking. I called my brother that night. His name is Paul. He's 55, retired from the Marines, currently lives outside of Asheville, and does landscape contracting. Paul is the person I call when I need someone who will not tell me what I want to hear. How long, he said. 14 months is what the emails say. There was a long pause. She pregnant? 8 weeks. Another pause. She pregnant? 8 weeks. Another pause. Yours? I don't know. Okay, he said. Don't do anything tonight. Don't say anything to her. Don't touch the finances. Don't touch the laptop. Just go home and be normal. I asked him what normal was supposed to look like right now. I don't know, he said. But you're a good actor when you have to be. You coached Eli's team through 3 losing seasons and never let those kids see you sweat. You can do one dinner. I went home. I watched Mara do her homework at the kitchen table. I ate whatever Petra had made. I couldn't have told you what it was. I said the right things. I watched the news. I went to bed. I did not sleep. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Her name is Adrian, and she'd been recommended to me by a guy I know from the industry who went through a bad split 3 years ago. I didn't have an appointment. I just called and said I needed to talk to someone today if possible. The paralegal put me through inside an hour. Adrian was direct in a way I appreciated. She didn't express sympathy, didn't do the soft voice thing. She just asked me questions and wrote things down. The first thing she told me was to stop touching the joint finances. The second thing she told me was to document everything I'd already seen, carefully, in a way that was legally obtained. The third thing she told me, and this is the part that hit different, was to get a paternity test as soon as the baby was born, if there was any question about the pregnancy. "There's a question," I said. She made a note. "We'll handle that when we get there." That was the first time I thought about that baby as a real thing I was going to have to reckon with. A child who might be mine. A child who might not be. Either way, a child who didn't ask for any of this. I drove home that night on autopilot. 3 weeks. That's how long I lived with it before I moved. 3 weeks of dinners and conversations and watching my wife sleep next to me. 3 weeks of watching her check her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. 3 weeks of Mara sitting across from me at the breakfast table talking about her friends and her college applications and her running times, with no idea that her family was, depending on how you counted, already over. I used those 3 weeks. I got a copy of every bank statement going back 2 years. I had a colleague I'd trust run a search on property records. Brent had apparently purchased a condo in South End 6 months ago, which I found interesting since according to his LinkedIn, he'd been renting a place in Noda for years. New condo, new address. There was a second name on the deed. My wife's name wasn't on the deed, but the initials matched a name I recognized from the email thread, the name she'd been using in correspondence with him. I'll just say, it wasn't her legal name. I gave everything to Adrian. She told me I'd done good work. The thing about doing good work when the subject is your own marriage is that you feel sick the entire time. You feel like a detective in a story that you never wanted to be in. Every piece of evidence you find is also proof that something you believed in was not what it looked like. Every document is a little funeral. I'm not telling you this was easy. I want to be very clear about that. Mara figured out something was wrong before I said a word. She came into the garage one Saturday morning while I was reorganizing my tools, which I do when I need to think, and she sat on the old cooler in the corner and watched me for a while without saying anything. She's always been like that. Eli would have talked immediately. Mara waits. "Dad," she finally said. "What's going on?" I kept my hands busy with a wrench that didn't need adjusting. "What do you mean? You've been weird for like a month." She paused. "You and Mom aren't talking right." "We're talking fine." "Dad." I looked at her. 17 years old. She looked so much like her mother when her mother was young. That used to be a simple thing to notice. "There are some things your mom and I need to work through," I said. "It's between us for now." She looked at me for a long moment. "Is it bad?" I didn't answer right away. Which was an answer. She got up and went inside without saying anything else. I stood there in the garage with a wrench in my hand and thought about how your kids are always watching you. Even when you think they're not. Even when they're 17 and seem like they're somewhere else entirely. I found out about the second account, not the one she'd moved money into, a third account, the day before I was ready to move. She'd apparently been depositing a portion of her bonus checks into it for 8 months. This one I found by accident. Genuinely, she received a paper statement, which is unusual, and it came to the house addressed to a version of her name she uses sometimes for informal things, and I opened it thinking it was something I was supposed to see. Inside was a statement from an account I'd never heard of. Balance, a little over $11,000. I photographed it. I sent the photo to Adrian. "This changes the asset picture," Adrian said. "This is good." I was starting to hate the word good. I want to tell you about the moment I decided how I was going to do it. I'd been going back and forth. Part of me, the quiet part, the part that still remembered the backyard cookout in Charlotte and the way she laughed, wanted to handle it privately. Have the conversation. Divide things up with some dignity. Let Mara find out gently, after the fact, once things were settled. The other part of me read the emails again. There's a specific exchange. I'll just describe it, I won't quote it, where she talks about me, not about the marriage being hard, not about feeling disconnected, not about any of the things people say when they're trying to justify something. She talks about me like I'm a prop, a logistical obstacle, something to be managed and then moved around. She'd been planning this, in writing, with someone else, for over a year, while sitting at the same dinner table as me, while sleeping in the same bed, while I was coaching youth baseball and driving Mara to track meets and making sure the mortgage got paid on time. There was a neighborhood block party coming up the following Saturday. Petra had organized it. She does that. She's good at that. She's the person in the neighborhood who sends the emails and reserves the park pavilion and makes sure everyone feels included. She'd been working on it for weeks. She'd invited both sides of both families. Her parents were going to be there. My mother was going to be there. The people from 3 streets over, who we've known for 15 years, were going to be there. I thought about that for a few days. Then I called Paul again. I need you to be there Saturday, I said. You're doing it at the party, he said. It wasn't a question. She built the stage, I said. I'm just going to use it. He was quiet for a second. Then, I'll be there at noon. I handled the finances first. Thursday morning, before anyone was awake, I moved my portion of the joint account into a separate account Adrian had advised me to open. I didn't take more than my documented share. I didn't touch what wasn't mine. I was precise. I had a spreadsheet. Then I had a conversation with my mortgage broker about what a potential separation would mean for the house. Then I called Eli at school. That was the hardest call. He answered on the second ring, which he never does. I don't know why I thought about that. I told him I had something serious to tell him and that I needed him to hear it from me before he heard it from anyone else. I told him his mother and I were separating. I told him there were reasons and that I would explain them when I could and that none of it was his problem to fix. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, "Did she do something?" "We'll talk about it this weekend," I said. "Dad." His voice had changed. He's 19, but right then he didn't sound like it. "Did she hurt you?" I had to take a breath before I could answer. "Yeah, buddy, she did. He said he was coming home. I told him he didn't have to. He said he was coming home. He drove 4 hours that Friday night. He showed up at 10:30 with a bag over his shoulder and stood in the driveway and hugged me for a long time without saying anything. He's taller than me now by about 2 inches. His mother's eyes. His grandfather's build. We sat in the garage until midnight and I told him most of it. Not everything, but enough. Saturday. The weather was good. The park pavilion was full by noon, maybe 60, 70 people. Petra had done her usual excellent job. There were folding tables with food and a cooler full of drinks and kids running across the grass. My mother was there, sitting in a lawn chair talking to the Hendersons from Maple. Petra's parents were there. Her dad was at the grill, which he always takes over, which has always mildly annoyed me, which now seemed almost funny. Petra was in her element, moving through the crowd, checking on things, making sure everyone had what they needed. She was wearing a yellow dress. She looked happy. She looked like a woman who had everything handled. Paul arrived at 12:15. He shook my hand and didn't say anything. Eli was already there, standing close, jaw tight. Mara was near the drinks table talking to her friend from school. I told her that morning that things were going to happen today and that I needed her to trust me. She'd looked at me for a long moment and then she'd said, "Okay, Dad," in a voice that sounded older than 17. At about 1 o'clock, when the food was out and the conversations were humming and everyone was settled, I walked to the center of the pavilion. I don't have a loud voice normally, but I grew up on job sites and when I need to fill a space, I can fill a space. "Hey, can I get everyone's attention for a second?" It took a minute. People turned. Petra turned. She looked at me with an expression I can only describe as the beginning of understanding. I want to say something publicly because I think some things shouldn't be kept private. The crowd had gone mostly quiet. Petra took a small step toward me. I looked at her, and I didn't look away. Petra and I are separating. I'm filing for divorce on Monday. I want the people closest to us to hear it from me directly, so there's no confusion about what happened or why. Someone made a sound. Petra's mother said her name. For the past 14 months, my wife has been in a relationship with a man named Brent. He works at her firm. I have documentation, emails, financial records, and I've had legal counsel for the past 3 weeks. Our joint accounts have been restructured accordingly. I'll be remaining in the family home while the process moves forward. Petra had gone very still. The yellow dress, her hands at her sides. There's a pregnancy. I don't know yet if the child is mine. We'll find out. Whatever the answer is, that child is not at fault for any of this, and I want to say that clearly. Her father had turned around from the grill. He was holding the tongs at his side like he'd forgotten they were there. I'm not saying this to humiliate anyone. I kept my voice level. I'm saying it because I have been standing in rooms with most of you for years, and I don't want any of you calling me in 2 months with condolences based on a version of this story that gets cleaned up after the fact. This is the version. This is what happened. I looked at Petra one more time. I hope you have a good rest of the party, I said. The fruit looks great. Then I walked to where Paul was standing, and he handed me a drink, and we walked out to the edge of the grass together without looking back. I'm not going to tell you it felt like winning. It didn't feel like winning. What it felt like was accurate. Like I had finally matched the outside to the inside. Like the thing I'd been carrying for 3 weeks had been set down somewhere visible, so I didn't have to carry it alone anymore. Mara found me by the oak trees at the edge of the park about 10 minutes later. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "The food really does look great," in a completely flat voice, and I laughed for the first time in 3 weeks. Eli was right behind her. He put his hand on my shoulder and left it there. The divorce was filed Monday as I said it would be. The asset concealment, 3 accounts, total of over $51,000 in redirected funds, was documented fully. Adrian's word for what we were able to recover was favorable. I've learned to accept favorable. The paternity question was answered 4 months later. The baby is Brent's. I want to say that I felt something clean when I found out. I want to tell you, it was relief, but the truth is, it was more complicated than that. There was something in me, some stubborn piece of me, that had been holding space for the possibility that the child was mine. And when that door closed, it closed in both directions. I'm not in that child's life. That's the reality. Whatever that child grows up to know about this situation, it won't include me. What does include me? Eli drives down once a month now, instead of the once a semester it used to be. Mara and I eat breakfast together every morning she's home, and we don't talk about anything important, and it's the best part of my day. I'm back to coaching youth baseball this spring. My team is 4-2. Paul came to visit last month, and we sat in the same garage, and I realized I hadn't thought about any of it for almost an entire week. I told him that. That's called healing, he said like it was obvious. I threw a bolt at him. He caught it. Here's what I want to say to whoever's listening to this. I didn't handle everything perfectly. There were nights during those 3 weeks when I should have gotten more sleep and didn't. There's a conversation I had with Eli on the phone that I would rephrase if I could. There are 100 small moments I wish I'd paid more attention to before I found an open laptop on a Tuesday morning. I am not the villain of the story. But I'm also not the hero. I'm just the guy who was standing in his driveway with the engine running, trying to figure out what knowing was going to cost him. Turns out, a lot. And also less than I thought. Those 2 things can both be true. That took me a while to understand. But I understand it now. I've had a lot of time to sit with this now. Not obsessing, just the kind of quiet thinking you do when the noise finally dies down and you're left with what actually happened. Here's what I keep coming back to. Nothing about Petra's choices happened in a vacuum, and neither did mine. She made a decision 14 months before I found out to step outside our marriage. Then she made another decision to keep going. Then another to start moving money. Then another to make a plan. Each one built on the last. That's how it works. Not one big catastrophic moment, but 100 small ones, each a little easier than the one before because the previous choice already bent the line. By the time I found that laptop open on the counter, she was so deep into the architecture of her own deception that I don't think she could have clearly seen the outside of it anymore. I'm not saying that to excuse it. I'm saying it because I think it's important to understand how people end up somewhere they never would have said they were going. And then there's my side of it. I spent 3 weeks doing something I had never done in 20 years of marriage. I paid close attention. I documented. I asked questions. I sat with a lawyer and got straight answers. I called my brother and got honest ones. I didn't react the night I found out, even though every part of me wanted to. I made a choice, over and over again, to be precise instead of emotional, to act instead of collapse. That discipline. I don't know where it came from exactly. Maybe the job site years. Maybe Paul. Maybe just the particular stubbornness that comes from having no good options and deciding that how you handle it is the only thing left you can control. But it mattered. The financial recovery, the legal position, the way my kids processed it, a lot of that came down to those 3 weeks of being steady when I had every reason not to be. What I want to say to anyone sitting with something similar right now is this. Your intelligence is a tool, and most people never fully use it on their own lives. We use it at work. We use it for other people's problems. And then when the thing hits closest to home, we go on autopilot and react. I almost did that. I almost said something the night I saw that screen and blew the whole thing. Don't do that. Think first. Feel later. And you will feel it, trust me. It doesn't go anywhere, it just waits. But think first. The other thing I'll say is that integrity isn't about being perfect. I made mistakes in that marriage. I know I did. There were years when I was more present at work than at home. There were conversations I didn't start when I should have. I'm not going to stand here and tell you I was a flawless husband. I wasn't. But there's a difference between being imperfect and being dishonest. There's a difference between a marriage that's struggling and a marriage that's been quietly dismantled from the inside. Eli understood that when I told him. Mara understood it the morning of the party when she said, "Okay, Dad," and meant it. That's all I needed. I still drive past the park where the block party was sometimes. I don't feel anything dramatic about it anymore. It's just a park. That's the thing about getting through something hard the right way, not the easy way, not the revenge fantasy way, but the right way. Eventually, it just becomes a place you drove past once. It doesn't follow you home.